Good evening, Crypt Keepers, and welcome to Cryptique, where we discuss all things paranormal, occult, UFOs, metaphysical, hidden history, forbidden archaeology, all things truther, and sometimes some political stuff. Ryan will be with us shortly, but what I need for you to do is subscribe. This is where you come in. We love likes, but it really doesn't move the needle for us, so please take a moment to subscribe. It's one click, and you can always change your mind, but it will give us the boost we need to get this Cryptique UFO off the ground. Socials are in the notes. You can let us know what you think at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. You can check out our cool stuff at cryptiquepodcaststore.com, and if you want to give us a one-time donation to help us keep going, you can always go to buymeacoffee.com/cryptiquepi. James P. Gray has held a diverse career, including roles as a Peace Corps volunteer in Costa Rica, a staff judge advocate and criminal defense attorney in the Navy JAG Corps, a federal prosecutor in LA, and a civil litigation attorney. He's also pursued political ambitions, running for Congress in 1998 as a Republican and for U.S. Senate in 2004 as a Libertarian. Judge Gray is renowned for his expertise in drug policy, having appeared on over 200 television and radio shows and public forums nationwide. He's authored books critiquing the war on drugs and provides insights into the role of a judge, drawing on his extensive experience on the bench and elsewhere. His website is simple, judgejimgray.com, and he spells Gray, Gray. His books, Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed, Wearing the Robe, 2 Paragraphs for Liberty, All Rise, The Libertarian Way, with Judge Jim Gray, and a novel I believe he penned with the help of his lovely wife, 2030 Kids. And you can hear him make fun of my microphone tonight on Cryptique. I guess welcome to the show, the Honorable Judge Jim Gray. How are you doing, sir?
Life has never been better, if I could be so blunt. We are blessed, and it's good to be appreciative. And I sell, Ryan, actually, Jeremiah, that probably everybody in our audience, including us, has a better life than Henry VIII did. He had undiagnosed gout to take a 20-mile trip on a bumpy carriage. Who needs 6 wives anyway? But we're blessed, and it's a good idea to appreciate it.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, perspective. Yeah, I mean, hey, we're living better than royalty in the past, so no complaints. So can you just kind of give the listeners a background on your fascinating life, because you've done so much to get to the point where you're at right now that I think they need to get some background to kind of see where you're coming from.
Let me get really basic then. I wrote a book on judging. It's called Wearing the Robe. And the first sentence in the introduction was, the best decision I ever made in my life was choosing my parents. And I've been the beneficiary of that so-called choice ever since. But I think it's given me a moral obligation to help those who did not choose quite so well, because I've been blessed. So I went to UCLA. Then I was in the Peace Corps in Costa Rica. I was a professor de educación física. I was in a colegio. I was taught PE in a high school, smallest high school in the country. Then after that, I went back to USC Law School. Within a week, I was being drafted. I received my 1A classification and a notice for a physical. This was 1968, height of the Vietnam War. So I joined the Naval ROTC in order just to be able to finish my law school. And then I did something kind of unique in May of 1970, I led a peace march from USC to the steps of City Hall in Los Angeles, trying to get Nixon to take our troops out of Cambodia, which I thought were there illegally. As a result of that, and then a really ironic thing happened, that I had a first-class midshipman cruise with the Navy that summer. So within about 6 weeks of my peace march, I was in the rivers of Vietnam on an LST, landing ship tank, where I was one of the few students on a training cruise ever to win a combat action ribbon. But so I was with Vietnam. Then I went into the Navy. I was a Navy JAG attorney, criminal defense attorney for about 4 years. We adopted a son from Vietnam, from an orphanage in Da Nang while that happened. He's now
Nice.
51 years old and doing really well, living here near Los Angeles airport. One of the best things I've ever done. After that, after my military career, I was a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, and was proud of that, was told, and it didn't have to be drummed into me very hard, Jeremiah, because you will do the right thing for the right reason every time. If you make a mistake, we've got your back. But if you do things for political reasons, for personal reasons, you're going to be held accountable. And I've told that to numbers of police officers and prosecutors ever since. And it's a basis for our country. And I'm fear that numbers of people with some cause have reason to believe that our Department of Justice now has been politicized, or the FBI has been politicized. And it's a hideous thing to happen to our country. We have to keep away from that. Thereafter, I was in private practice for a while, and then I was appointed to the bench here in California at the end of 1978. Excuse me, no, that's not right. 1983. I was on a DUI calendar, driving under the influence. Quickly saw that we were not. If you were an alcoholic, what we were doing wasn't going to make any difference. We'd tell you not to do it again, slap your wrist, and you go out again and you drink because you knew you couldn't not do it. And then you'd have one drink, you'd have 5 drinks, and so I probably put in the first drug court in the country back by 6 months after I was appointed, or addressing alcohol related offenses. And we were successful. We kept about 65% of the people, the alcoholics, I called them high risk problem drinkers, but kept them off alcohol for 6 months, as long as I was able to keep statistics. And I still have a packet of letters, maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches, from people saying, well, dear Judge Gray, I was going to divorce my husband. He'd drunk. He would hit me. He was irresponsible with the children, but now he's off alcohol. Thank you. You've given me my husband back. So, how many letters like that do you believe? Because we, as on the bench, I can put you where you don't want to go. I'll get your attention, and we can start good things happening. Another example of that was that when I was on juvenile court, I found a grandmother felt it was an act of love to teach her 12-year-old grandson how to shoplift a jacket from Target stores. I mean, what kind of a life is that young man going to have if that's the leadership? So mentoring is huge. And we started something called peer court in Orange County Superior Court. And we would take juvenile delinquency cases, and certainly not just jaywalking, but certainly not murder either. But you take some of these to a local high school and impanel a jury of high school students to ask them questions, and they'd already acknowledged the offense. And then the high school jury would retire and give a recommended sentence to a real judge, and then the judge would impose it. Frequently moving it downward a bit. Those guys were pretty tough. But if the person successfully finished the sentence in 4 months, the charges were dismissed. So it was a diversion program. But I would talk about mentoring. I would say, well, okay, George, think of your 3 best friends. Think of them. Close your eyes. Think of your 3 best friends. You don't have to tell me who they are. Do you have them in mind? Yes. Are they going to be successful 10 years from now? Well, actually, no, I don't think they will. Don't you realize, George, that if you hang out with young people that smoke marijuana, ditch class, talk back to their teachers, they're not going to be successful. And the odds are good that you aren't going to be successful either. So let me tell you a secret in life. You show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And so not only does George start thinking about that, but the high school 6 or 8 high school jurors start thinking of that, and have another 50 high school kids in the audience. Those sorts of things matter.
Yeah.
And the last thing before I go off this tirade, but I was in a formal probation violation calendar. And so I would get reports from people from probation, where people were on probation, and they'd come back. And if you got 3 stars from the report, that meant you're kind of treading water, you're getting through the program. 4 stars means you're taking it seriously for yourself. And 5 stars means not only are you taking it seriously for yourself, but you're also helping your colleagues take it seriously and get their lives around. So I didn't get any 5 stars, but I would call them up first in front of maybe 50 other people in the audience. And I'd tell them what had happened, say, congratulations. I think this is wonderful. You're doing a fantastic job. Get down off the bench and shake their hands. Twice, maybe early 20s, young men broke down in tears in front of their colleagues because
Wow.
they would tell me, Judge Gray, I've never had a man commend me for anything in my life. We've got
Wow.
to mentor our children. We've got to support them when they do a good job. And if I'd have to put you in jail, Jeremiah, I'm sorry you chose to drink, you chose to whatever, but think of how you put yourself into that position. Don't put yourself in that position again. I'm going to take you into custody for the next 5 days, but I know you can do better. And then, see my bailiff, click, everybody in the room is listening, saying, hey, wow, this dude in the black robes, I better take him seriously. And it really made a difference. And I'm
Sure.
proud of that. Thereafter, I was on the Superior Court, trial court for about 25 years. I retired. It's hard to get my mind around this still, but I retired 15 years ago last January. And it's, but I then tell people in my mediations that that's my background. But you have to understand, I became a judge when I was 11 years old. That's why I'm still so young, and I don't allow any cross-examination by your
Sure.
attorney on that one. But
Fair enough.
now I'm doing private mediations and arbitrations, and we help people resolve their disputes. It's a really rewarding position to be in.
Sure. Sure. I imagine it is. And I mean, you really hit the nail on the head when you talk about mentoring kids, because I feel like that is possibly the biggest area that we need improvement in, because I I I feel like kids don't have responsibilities anymore. They're used to having things handed to them, and I know that in schools they're focusing on building relationships with principals and stuff like that. And I mean, I know there's times where a kid will, well, for instance, there's a scene where a young boy pushed a girl down from behind and started punching her in the back of the head for no reason. Second
I don't
grade.
care if there was a reason. I mean, come
Right,
on.
right. And he went to the principal, and in building a relationship, he was there for about half an hour, got a lollipop, and went back to the classroom. And guess what? He's reoffended several
Oh
times.
yeah, sure. Well, let me tell you an example. When I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, a federal prosecutor, the first big time drug case I had, DEA, they were going to have an undercover buy of a lot of heroin, actually something like 60 pounds of heroin. It's a lot of heroin. And so the DEA agent who was supposed to make the buy, all at this culmination, they're supposed to have everybody buy and then arrest everyone in sight, said, whoa, wait a minute,
Mhm,
wait a minute. See this guy that's going to sell? I know that guy. I went to high school. Bring in somebody else because he'll recognize me. So they did.
mhm.
But then I was talking to the agent saying, well, what was this guy like in high school? I said, oh, we were friends. Well, what happened? Well, I was so blessed. I was mentored by our basketball coach. He was mentored by a drug dealer. But for the grace of God, it would have been reversed. And he's right.
Yeah.
Say what you will. If it isn't the basketball coach or the parent or the scout leader or the teacher or somebody, there's always a drug dealer out there. Say what you will. Charles Manson was brilliant at mentoring his family. There'll always be
Yeah.
these people lurking out there to take our kids astray. So it's up to us to do it and do it better. Accountability is huge. I talked about my parents at the beginning, but they raised me to, okay, a long time ago. But if I didn't make my bed before breakfast, I would lose 5 cents of my 25-cent a week allowance. There are repercussions, there are consequences. So
Sure.
one of the best things you can do for somebody, and we're not doing it well at all, just like Jeremiah, just like you said.
Yeah, it's really a big concern for me. Now, I mean, I hear things from my kids. They're 13 and 16, and they talk about middle school being worse than the high school as far as like drugs and sex and just, and I'm like, so is this the age group because of like, when they grew up, that this age group of like 13 to 15 right now is just going to have problems? And my older one, 16 to like 19, maybe they had a different kind of coming up in school. But yeah, they're saying that the middle school is worse than the high school.
Well, that's discouraging to hear, but also let me put this in a little perspective. I read
Hmm.
Aristotle, back in Greek times, and he was saying, "Oh, the younger generation is going to the birds. They'll never make
Sure.
anything of themselves." So that's always been out there. But I think that these cell phones, the internet, is changing our people. They're You can have conversations with people you don't even know who they are, and that will
Hmm.
lead us astray.
Sure.
It's a good idea for parents. When I was growing up, my parents limited our television ability to watch television. I think parents should limit the ability of their children to get on the internet, if at all.
Hmm.
They'll get ostracized to some degree if they don't. But it's a huge problem, and the internet has caused a major difficulty there. It's We went to see a show yesterday here in Orange County, actually called
Hmm.
Beetlejuice, which I walked out on at intermission. But they're using all this foul language, just custom. I'm sorry, but if you throw these languages in there and there are children in the audience and they applaud and they laugh, what does it say? I'm not shocked by it. I've heard. Oh,
Hmm.
I was in the fraternity too, by the way, but it is not healthy. We need to understand that, yes, we can say these things, but it's not a healthy attitude. We've got to get. I'm not a prude. At least ask my dog who just walked out on me. But we need to bring values back, and accountability and understanding, and we're getting away from that. Uh, the media has something to do with it, but standards do as well. Choose your friends. Choose your friends
Yeah.
well, and that will make a big difference.
Yeah, one of the
Absolutely.
things that I saw when I was kind of looking into TikTok and this whole push to ban it is that TikTok in the US is kind of a mess culturally speaking. It's lowest common denominator sort of stuff. But what I keep finding is people saying that they have family in China or they visited or whatever. Somehow they're exposed to the Chinese version of it. And it's patriotic, it's help your fellow man, it's all the kind of values that you would want to actively promote are being actively pushed through sort of the state controlled version of it. And
Well,
I I think the narrative that people are trying to push is that TikTok, they understand that TikTok is destructive and that these apps and kind of being just drip fed this destructive lifestyle that's usually portrayed in these, that it's destructive. So they've unleashed that version of it on the rest of the world. But for them, they keep a version that's a lot more wholesome. I mean,
well, there's different TikToks, I guess. Again, I'm not a techie at all, but if you're going to start having the government ban something like TikTok, that's a trap, because now the
Yeah.
government's going to control. Oh no, that's not true. You can't hear that, and then all of a sudden it's going to be, well, my political party is telling the truth, and the other political party is not. It's a trap. And we cannot get into that sort of thing. On the
mm,
other hand, I mean, there's just no substitute for parents to tell them, hey, take it for what it's worth. Oh, it was on the internet, so it's true. And I'm
Yeah.
not quite so sure. It's kind of like saying it was in writing, so it's true. No, you have to be careful about forming your opinions and believing different things. And that's called education. That's called sophistication. And it's up to us to do it, but not the government.
yeah, true.
Absolutely. I wanted to get into a lot of libertarian stuff with you because that I feel like I'm being kind of drawn to that party, but there's some things that I would like a little clarification on, and I don't know if Ryan feels the same way. I think that a lot of listeners, it's just it's kind of it's not really out there as much as the other parties. And I have found, I mean, that if you are a Republican, everybody on the left is evil. They're trying to transgender your kids. If you're on the left, everybody on the right is a gun toting Nazi that wants to kill everybody. And I've dipped my toe in the libertarian I, I I don't know if this is a good representation of them, but like Jesse Ventura, I think Robert Reich is one of the guys. And I feel like it's the same thing. Like they're just saying, oh, well, the left is right about the right, and the right is right about the left, but we're different. Is that something that is that just how it's going to be now from now on, that we can't ever have a civilized conversation and everybody else is an awful, like, dehumanized enemy? Is that ever going to change?
Jeremiah, how have we gotten here? Because I'll quote my father again. He was a hero to me, a self-made man who ended up being a federal district judge in Los
Mhm.
Angeles. And he said, "You have every right to disagree, but you have no right to be disagreeable." If we could just get
Okay.
back to that, if we could have some leaders stand up and say, wait, we have some problems here. Now, you have a different perspective, you have a different background, you come from a different idea, but let's gather together and discuss things and try to work out a resolution. Now,
Mhm.
notice the word that I use. Most human problems do not have a solution. That means if somebody goes through red light, hits your car, breaks your arm, the solution is not to have had your arm broken. Well, I can't do that. So the resolution is, okay, we'll hold them accountable, give you some money, get on with your life. But we need to be able to discuss things. How did we get so polarized? And here I go back to, remember when we had all these cable TV stations begin, and I thought to myself, wow, it's going to be wonderful. We're going to have 300 cable TV stations. We're going to all get a different perspective, a different view on things. And boy, was I wrong. Because now what
Yeah.
we've seen is you'll have these various stations will learn to have your biases. They'll look to your biases and they will cater to them. And then not only if you disagree with me, am I wrong, I'm evil. And that's
Mhm.
where we are today. We need somebody to stand up with some leadership and say, that's just not true. Now, okay, you were raised in such and such a family and such a background or whatever. So you have a different perspective. Good. Let's talk about it. And let's see. And then
Yeah.
let's quote Milton Friedman, who was an all-time libertarian. And he said, quote, we should judge our programs by the results, not their good intentions. No, let's talk about that for a minute because okay, the minimum wage now recently here in California has been raised for people that work in fast foods from $15 to $20 an hour. Oh, that makes wonderful sense. Oh, I'm going to help you. Well, what it really does is it's far better for a country to have 100 people working at $15 an hour, in my opinion, than 75 people working at $20 an hour. Because some people, I'm sorry to say it and be so blunt, are not yet worth $20 an hour. Particularly the young people just joining the labor market. They haven't learned a
Mhm.
work ethic. They haven't learned, to be accountable. But give them a job. But if you raise that minimum wage, we used to go to McDonald's and buy a Big Mac and order it from a cashier, right? Now we order it from a computer, directly
Mhm.
resulting because of the minimum wage issues. It's much
Yep.
better for people to be able to get that first job, learn a work ethic, and either be uh, increased in salary by their current company or go somewhere else because now I'm worth it. So the
Yeah.
good intentions are, wait a minute. And then you get us into, we believe in lesser government, smaller. Do we need government? Absolutely. And what part
Sure.
of government do we need? Well, look at Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. That's a pretty good place to start, where we, the people, delegate to the federal government certain powers. And what's that? Well, to have an army to keep us safe and the roads and the mail service and that sort of thing. But
Sure.
there's nothing in the Constitution that authorizes at all the federal government to be involved in education. Nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
It's gone incrementally up. Same thing with healthcare. And every time
Mhm.
the federal government gets involved, they start getting a lot of involvement and power, but it takes it away from we the people. So
Yeah.
the federal government should not have anything to do with education whatsoever, nor with healthcare. And when I was in first grade, I had nephritis. It's a kidney infection, and supposedly it was life-threatening. I had blood in the urine. I had a high temperature, and penicillin saved my life. And we had a medical doctor who was our doctor who would actually make house calls once a week. He came over and inject me with my penicillin and see how I'm doing. That was the free market. We
Mhm.
don't have that at all today. But we could. we could bring this back. But now the federal government has all these regulations and bureaucracies and everything else.
Yeah.
So medical doctors, I have some friends, they say 40% of my time is spent filling out forms, trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to do this and get billed. Get the federal government out of it. But wait a minute, let me go back to Milton Friedman again, because you are going to have some people. I'm compassionate. We are compassionate people, and I don't want somebody to bleed on the streets or to have suffer from an illness, not be able to see a medical doctor. So have medical savings accounts based on your money, based on your salary. And so we will give you a medical savings account that you will spend the money. And if you don't spend it, it'll carry over for the next year so that you'll have more of it. And eventually it can go into your retirement account. So you will spend it wisely, but then bring the free market back into it. Say, I'm going to ask you for such and such. Bad example, but big government keeps getting involved. If we have an emergency call here in Orange County, where I live in California, you're going to get the fire department come out, and they're going to send out an ambulance, and they're also going to send out a hook and ladder at the same time. Why? Because they can. And now they get to charge for it. The hook and ladders are almost never used, but they're there, and we, the people, have to pay for it. But if you go back to the free enterprise system, which we libertarians really count on, you're not going to have that problem anymore. Because I don't want that, so I'm not going to pay you for it. But now we have to. So it's just a question of incremental government. And I wrote a column recently. In fact, if any your listeners would be interested, go to judgejimgray.com, and it's called 2 Paragraphs for Liberty. And the one I sent out today is talking about the government spending. And we have the taxes are so high because government spending is so high. So let's take a really easy one. Let's abolish the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Now, maybe we can argue whether the Native Americans should have ever had a bureau to oversee them or not. I don't think so, but one way or the other. That was 200 years ago. What are they doing now? There's almost more people working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs than there are Native Americans that they're addressing. And it costs huge amounts of money. And by the way, you go to an Indian reservation, you'll see these houses they're living in. They're plain vanilla. There's really not interesting. Why? Because they don't own them. So why should I spend money fix up my house if I don't own it? Or I want to start a business. I want to start a mom and pop business. I cannot put a mortgage on my house for seed money because I don't own the house. So let's get the government out of this stuff. Let's get the government out of educating, quote unquote, the Native American children. Let the parents do that and let the locals do that. So that's how it's come. I wrote this article. FEMA, for example, the federal emergency thing. During what was the hurricane in New Orleans, Katrina, where it was documented that FEMA had 1,000 recreational vehicles in the parking lot at the airport that they paid huge amounts of money for that never got out of the parking lot. They never even used them. So let's do away with them. We're paying them lots of money right now for planning because there's no national emergency going on now. Instead, when we have a hurricane or a fire or whatever, contract with something like the Red Cross or various other companies who do it far better for far less money, but get the government out of these things. We have a board of tea experts. Wait a minute. The federal government has a board of tea experts. It started
like drinking tea?
Drinking tea, yes, because the Congress was so concerned that the British, who were exporting tea to the United States, were going to take advantage of us. So they wanted to be able to have this board nix to do away with. So once a year, we would have these experts come and drink tea at our expense and decide whether it was worth it or not. Wait a minute. Come on. The free market will take care of that. Ryan, if they're trying to sell you some tea that's no good, you ain't going to buy it. Or if for some reason they send you some that's harmful, you can always bring a lawsuit. I mean, so they have the popcorn board. They have the National Mango Board. They have the Christmas tree promotion board, which costs everybody that buys a real Christmas tree pays an extra 15 cents on it so that we pay for this board. We have the Corporation for Travel Promotion, which means, we want to encourage people to travel to the United States. What about tourism guides? What about tourist books, that sort of thing? But we charge $4 extra per visa for people that come here so that they can pay for. I mean, no. But you understand the reality, and this is what libertarians do understand, that the governments do not relinquish power easily. They don't.
Right.
And anything that will, they do not look in favor at anything that might weaken the power that they have. And so even with regard to the national tea experts during the Clinton administration, it's like 1994, the Congress passed a law and Clinton signed it, abolishing it, but we couldn't actually get rid of it until the year 2023, just because it's residual, the governments keep holding on. So let's pare back the government. Thomas Jefferson was a libertarian in his thinking, and he said we need to have a revolution every generation. It doesn't have to be bloody because of but just our voting, and to keep
Mhm.
the government at bay. If you don't have that to keep the government at risk, you'll end up with a dishonest government. The government that cares more about building its power and its money than it cares about we the people. And that's what we're seeing today.
I
Yeah.
could not agree more. 100%.
No,
So
wait a minute, Jeremiah. If you agree with me, if you let that word get out, you agree with me 100% on anything, your credibility is going to be destroyed. So be
that's
careful.
okay. That's okay. I don't have much credibility anyway, but I do. How do we get to that? How do you go to someone and say, "Listen, I know that you came from the bottom and you put all this effort into law school and you may have a doctorate in something else and you are a sitting senator or congressman or whatever." How do you go to that person and say you should only have power for 4 years? And
Well, okay,
how are they gonna react?
you're getting into term limits there, and I think that's a
Mhm.
viable thing. It's something I believe in. If I were king, and there's precedents for this, King James, and by the way, he was not the one that lost his head. That was King Charles. But there's King James. So when I'm king, I would have a two-term Senate maximum, so that they could serve 12 years in the U.S. Senate. Then they could sit out one, and then they could do it again if the voters wanted to bring him back. 10 years in
Okay.
Congress, five consecutive terms in Congress, then sit out or run for something else, because you get away from that sterilization, that just, I've got it, I own it, so now I'm going to just do what I want to. But
Mhm.
and I do the same thing, by the way, for the United States Supreme Court. 15 years, whatever the term, 18, whatever it would be, but put it on there, and that way you wouldn't have a president appointing somebody really young so that he could keep his legacy for 40
Mhm.
years, which is also a mistake. That the 15
Yeah.
years is enough. But we need to, and this is idealistic, but I can tell you it's our government, Jeremiah, and if it isn't working, we have no one to blame but ourselves. We're not active enough. We're not taking
Yeah.
people to task, investigating, seeing what the issues are, who's done what, because politicians are really good at followership. They'll follow where
Mm.
the votes are.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that is on the internet, so it's true. I mean, we go back to that again. You
Yeah.
need to look into the issues and to pursue it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of what they're doing, especially with the sensationalized media that's coming out. I mean, I think part of it's like with TikTok and Instagram and these online platforms where you get 1,000 little tiny short form videos or blog posts or whatever opinions in a couple of hours. They need something that stands out, so they have to make it like there was some story years and years ago where it was Republicans trying to say, I forget what state, but they were saying like Democrats are trying to ban this, and the guy pulls out a hamburger and he takes a bite of it and he's saying like they don't want us to be able to farm cattle. So it got a bunch of reactions. A lot of people were looking into it, and if you just Google it and kind of look at what the legislation actually was, it was some tax on the way to handle like wastewater or some kind of pollutants that were resulting from cattle farming. So there's usually some grain of truth to it, but they twist it to the point that it stands out from the other scary things you've been exposed to in a day. And then, like you were saying, they've done a really good job of catering to their specific market. It's all marketing, really. They want
Well,
to,
logically,
yeah, and they want to convince
logically,
you that they
well,
are on your side and that there's a problem and that they're the only ones with the answer.
sure. Sure, man. Poor baby. I'm going to take care of you. We
Yeah.
go back when I was in high school. It probably did not happen with you, but we were required reading to read Alexis de Tocqueville's book, Democracy in America. And this guy was French. And in the 1820s, he did a significant tour of the United States and went back to France and wrote this book. And he said, democracy is going to be successful. It's a great experiment and it will work until such time as the elected officials realize that they can buy people's votes with their own tax money. Guess where we are today? All of this, the student loan forgiveness, direct buying of votes, the
Yeah.
minimum wage, direct buying of votes, and whether it works or not, Milton Friedman, is incidental. If people
Yeah.
think it works, then okay. We
Yeah.
get, in the housing stuff and the homeless, huge issue, particularly here in California. But
Mhm.
we have all kinds of companies that would put in manufactured housing, just manufacture it and put it into places. Oh no, the rules are again, the unions are so strong and the rest that you can't do it. So we need to expose it. And the big thing we're doing, we're doing now. We're talking about these issues. I tell people I don't have all the answers, and I prove that with regularity, but at least we can bring up issues and discuss them, compare notes, and figure out how best to go forward. And if I'm an incrementalist, if what we're doing is working a little bit better tomorrow than it is today, good. Let's keep it up. And
Yeah,
so
we'll take it.
we need to do it. But it's our government, and if it isn't working, we have no one to blame but ourselves. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of not working, can you tell us a little bit, I guess, from a libertarian point of view on this quote unquote war on drugs that we've been losing for the past 30 years?
I was a federal prosecutor. Like I said, I was a criminal defense attorney in the Navy. I saw it firsthand. I was a drug warrior. And then I'd been on the bench for about 9 years, and I'd seen in my own courtroom how this simply was not working. Was not working at all. In fact, in juvenile court, you would see that juvenile street gangs would use this as a recruiting tool. Hey, I mean, you're not going to be in the NBA when it really comes down to it. You'll never earn as much money as you can by selling drugs. And they're probably right, and they recruit
Sure.
people to do it. So I did something very unusual as a sitting trial court judge here in Orange County, California, a pretty conservative place. I held a press conference. In fact, I remember it was April the 8th, 1992. And I told anyone that would listen that our nation's policy of drug prohibition had failed us, and we need to put our heads together and abolish drug prohibition and come up with something else that would work. And so I've been doing that ever since. I've been on Stossel specials, and I've done a lot of talking about this. I wrote a book on it called Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed and What We Can Do About It, a judicial indictment of the war on drugs. By the way, I am truly proud to say it was endorsed by Milton Friedman, by George Shultz, former Secretary of State under Reagan, by Walter
Mhm.
Cronkite, and Governor Gary Johnson of New Mexico. Eventually, I was his running mate for vice president, and he's running for president. But we got this word out there, and I'm proud. And actually, when I was on a John Stossel special, I met this lady in the uh, office who was for ABC News, and she was kind of standoffish. Went up and introduced myself. She said, "Well, I know you. I went to Princeton, and our poli sci class had us read your book." And that's pretty good. I was very pleased
Sure.
with something like that. So we couldn't do it worse if we tried. California. You know what the largest the largest product is, agricultural product in California, and has been for years? Marijuana.
Marijuana.
Number
Yeah.
two is grapes. So now you know how pervasive it is. So it's there. It's a question of, shall we regulate and control it and tax it and then hold? But the bottom line comes: hold people accountable for what they do, but not what they put into their bodies. If I'm
Sure.
harming myself, that's a medical issue. If I'm not harming anyone else, I'm just harming myself by putting in whatever I'm doing. That's a medical issue. Bring me closer to medical professionals that can help me. And I would
Yeah.
have marijuana would be treated like wine, just treated like alcohol, strictly regulated and controlled. You have controls on advertising, you have controls on who can buy it, what their ages are, how close it can be to schools, that sort of thing. Good, because you go to any You go to any junior high school or high school today, like you were saying, Jeremiah, and you can probably find somebody that's going to give you a free sample of marijuana. They don't
Hmm.
give you a free sample of bourbon because that's available in other ways. But if it's illegal, it's going to be there. And so it's not a question of shall we get rid of this stuff? It's a question of how should we regulate and control it? Let me go one step further. Fentanyl, which by the way is mostly the composite comes from China, but fentanyl, no one in our country basically has died from an overdose of fentanyl. Virtually no one. They die from fentanyl poisoning because they don't know it's in there. Or if they do
Yeah.
know it's in there, they don't know what the strength is. I
Yeah.
eat the same cookie today that has some fentanyl on it, and I felt pretty good yesterday. Eat the same cookie tomorrow, and unbeknownst to me, it has 5 times the fentanyl in it, and I die. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen with regard to alcohol. It did during alcohol prohibition. We had people dying from this
Oh
white
yeah.
lightning and stuff because of the impurities in the alcohol. Repeal alcohol prohibition, that problem went away virtually overnight. So
Right.
these are things, but they're sanctimonious. And I go back to the Nixon administration, by the way, and he knew that drug prohibition did not work. According to his own Attorney General Katzenbach, who wrote an article about this, he knew that drug prohibition didn't work, but he did know that the political benefits of passing the Controlled Substances Act should be enormous. Oh, we're protecting you, fighting against
Yep.
somebody that couldn't fight back. And Katzenbach said thereafter that the political benefits for Nixon administration in passing this controlled substance law was beyond their belief. That, oh, everybody
Wow.
rallied to it because he's protecting us, he's going to protect our children, and it's simply not true. So we
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to bring that to people's attention,
Mhm.
and we have many too many people in prison today that are only there because they themselves use drugs, and then they have to sell drugs in order to support their habits. That's just, it's stupid, but politically still it works.
It's
Oth-
interesting.
other
My
other than
dad.
that other than that, I have no opinion whatsoever.
Okay. So my dad was a police officer for about 25 years in a pretty nice suburb. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff, going on, but there were drug problems just like everywhere. And for the longest time, it was just, oh, we got to get these guys off the street. We got to get them off the street. And then eventually he came to the realization, I probably was like 15, and it was really weird hearing it come from my dad. And he's like, they just need to make everything legal and just control the crap out of it. Just because, I mean, like you said, and this was way before fentanyl. This was really even before there was like a big meth problem in the United States. Just make it all legal, help the people that need help, and you won't be having people that are going out doing carjacking so they can buy $10 worth of crack or something like that. And to hear him say it back then was just such a shock to me, and it really stuck with me. And then ever since, I paid attention to, like, well, hold on, all these people are getting rich over here off of this, and all these people are still getting rich off of it. All the gangs and stuff like that, they're still getting rich off of it. The only people that are suffering are the ones that are addicted or have made mistakes in trying something like that. And it's really
I,
a sad thing to see.
I see it in court all the time, and that's why I took that position that I did a long time ago. But if you think about it, look down in Mexico or look at the cartels in Colombia. The cartels in Mexico probably have more money and more guns than the military does. I mean,
Hmm.
the military can't really fight them straight on. And it's all our drug money that's doing it. How does that make you feel?
Yeah.
It isn't drugs that
Yep.
are bringing down the country of Mexico. It's our drug money. And the same
Hmm.
thing happened in Colombia. So
Yep.
these are things you need to look at. And when it comes down to it, if you're going to use heroin, not a smart thing to do. If you're going to use cocaine, methamphetamines, whatever, you know, at least bring them closer to medical professionals that can help them. Make sure you have the quality control, you know what the strength is, the purity is, and then get
Hmm.
it as a prescription from a medical doctor. And
Yeah.
and then it's going to be much less expensive, so you're not going to have to burglarize my house or your car in order to get them. And we're going to have accountability, so hold people accountable. If they burglarize your house to get their money, that's a crime. And
Right.
then, but you also put them into a drug court or probation thereafter and monitor them. And what happened in the Netherlands, forever. You could go to these coffee houses and stuff and get all this various stuff. And, it worked really well. And it's still there. And Portugal now is doing the same thing. It's working pretty well. It's always going to have problems, but at least let's not have the artificial problems. Hold people accountable for what they do, not what they put into their bodies. And anybody, by God, that sells methamphetamines to a 12-year-old child, I'm going to put in prison for a good long time.
Yeah.
Accountability is huge with regard to that. But if they sell to, sell it, regulate it, control it, tax it. But today, the federal government, even on marijuana, because marijuana is now regulated and controlled in numbers of states, either medical or even recreational. But the federal government will not allow them to do business with banks. So they have to do business with cash, which mainly makes them a prime suspect for a takeover robbery, because look at all the cash they've got there.
Yeah.
And they cannot write off their expenses. They can't write off the expenses of their employees or their product that they sell. Get the federal government out of this thing, for God's sake, and let the states decide how best to do it.
I mean, yeah, like in Missouri, you can, like, it's recreational now, and you can get a license to, like, if you want to grow a plant. But if you get that license, you are not allowed to have a firearm at your house. It's so bizarre. I don't really understand why. I mean, it just seems like such an odd thing to tag on to it. But
in politics, Jeremiah, as you probably know, in politics, reality is irrelevant. It's only the voters' perception of reality that counts. And so, nobody, I've never heard of anybody getting high on marijuana and going out and shooting somebody. They get mellow. Oh, man, that sort of. I've never used marijuana. I'm not interested. But methamphetamines, that's totally different. But with regard to marijuana, that makes no sense. And in fact, maybe they should be able to protect themselves and protect their marijuana plants, for all I know.
I was going to say it's almost like a deterrent to, like, oh, you can do this. Yeah, it's legal, but you won't. I mean, you want to grow plants? Fine, but you can't have firearms, and you'll have people come into your house with masks on wanting those plants.
Well, let me stop you again for a minute, because words are important. I do not want to legalize any of these drugs. I do not at all. If you think of a legalized drug, think aspirin. Your 12-year-old daughter could go to your local pharmacy and buy a case of it, either be generic or name brand, whatever. I don't know anybody that wants that. It's called regulated and controlled. And it matters. It's in talking with people. Hey, do you want to legalize marijuana? Which immediately means, oh, you don't care if my 12-year-old goes out and gets stoned. No, I don't want to do. Hey, would you like to treat marijuana like wine and strictly regulate and control it? Sure. Yeah. So words matter, and in this case, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't legalize cocaine ever. I'd medicalize it. So a medical doctor who knows what she is doing can talk with you, counsel you, tell you what's going on. How much do you use, Ryan? Well, we'll do this much now, but then we'll ease it back, or we can try something else, to get you off it, and it will work. It's worked in Switzerland for a long time. It will work here. But we just need some leaders to be able to get this word out there. I care about your children so much that I do not want to prohibit this stuff, because then they're going to go out and sell it, or they're going to buy stuff that's polluted or whatever else. I want to regulate and control. See, my dog agrees with that too. So that's good.
Absolutely. So you had mentioned that. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to tag on to that it is amazing that that more people aren't pushing for this. Everything you say makes perfect sense to me. And it's a lot of the same things I've thought for a long time. My dad thought for a long time. I mean, we have a good example of it. We have guys like Al Capone and Bugsy Siegel, who were massively powerful during Prohibition, and they didn't exactly go away after Prohibition was repealed. They kind of moved into gambling or whatever else, but they had way less power than they did before.
Well, they had all that money, so they put it into various other things, but they got their seed money from alcohol prohibition.
Yeah.
The worst thing that happened to Bugsy Siegel was when we finally repealed alcohol prohibition. And this is the same thing. That's going to be the same thing with regard to these drug cartels and everything else here.
Right.
It's a bad situation. And I'm a pretty radical person. I believe in accountability, and ask my children. But if you're going to go out and drive a motor vehicle under the influence, you're a danger. And I don't. You're a danger to yourself. Okay, that's one thing. You're also a danger to others. And I'm in the responsibility business, so we're going to hold you accountable. And courts do that pretty well. But we need programs, and we mostly need that leadership to stand up and talk sense to people. And we don't have that today.
Well, I think a barrier to it is getting the average voter to listen to it. Because the average voter kind of looks at headlines and just takes it at face value, and they don't give a lot of thought to it beyond that. A lot of people don't look into anything, just beyond whatever article they're reading or whatever they're watching.
Bumper stickers. I mean, it comes from everywhere.
No,
I mean,
it's true.
Like there are examples of things that I've seen that seem very political. Like several degrees of separation, so I don't know them very well, but there's a couple that I know of who they were together when he was 18 and she was 16, something like that. And one of the parents got upset and called the police, and now he has a statutory rape thing on his record. Even though they're still together, they're married, they have kids, they've been together for like 20 years. They were both in high school, but there are all these problems that they run into because the penalties and the restrictions on people who have a record like that, regardless of how that record kind of was established, they always get harsher because it's always more politically popular or positive to be harder on crime, to be harder on whatever particular offense you're going after, as opposed to, well, if we regulate and control these substances, which is, I think, what some places are trying to do with these clinics, where you can go and use whatever your drug is under proper supervision so that you can kind of come off of it in a safe way.
Well, let me pass along a couple of disturbing things to you.
No.
Half of the people, more than half of the people in prison today in our country grew up in a family without a father in it. Mm-hmm. There's a connection. Now, some of those fathers were in jail for various things, or you get to the welfare system, which actively encourages the father not to live with the mother of his children, because the mother with the children will get more money from welfare if he's not there than if he is. And he'll get more money from welfare if he's single than if he's with them. That's downright stupid. It's really important for fathers to, there's a difference between a mother and a father, and you need to bring those fathers back so they have an encouragement not to do this. So Milton Friedman, remember him? He had something he called a negative income tax. And I don't like the word negative, I call it a stipend. And this is a little off the subject, but I'll bring it back. The welfare system is really encouraging people not to work. And in fact, they penalize you if you do work. So guess what? You don't, or you hide it. But he would, for example, using these figures only for illustrative purposes, nobody in the country will pay any income taxes on their first $40,000 of income. Nobody. If you make between $40,000 and $100,000, there'll be a flat tax. So you'll pay 10 cents of those dollars to the government. And you earn between $100,000 and $400,000, you'll pay 13 cents of each of those dollars to the government. And if you're blessed and you earn more than $500,000, you'll pay 18 cents of each of those. Now, what if you earn no money? He doesn't care whether you, and I don't care, if you just lost your job, you're lazy, you want to go back to school. I don't care. If you're a citizen and a holder of a green card, you earn no money, the government will give you $20,000 a year, probably broken down into 12 monthly payments. But for every dollar you earn between $0 and $40,000, you lose 50 cents of your stipend. So you always have an incentive to earn the extra dollar, which is totally not true today in our world. And then you do away with all of this other welfare stuff, all of these other intrusions, all this other bureaucracy, and you just do away with them. Unless somebody has truly special needs, then that would be different. But then everybody has well, the administration will cost so much less, the intrusion into your life would be so much less, and the bureaucracy. And the results, though, would be so much better. So let's do that. I call it a stipend. Dr. Friedman is just brilliant with this sort of thing. But we need to adopt a program of that kind to simplify this whole thing. And incentives matter. Again, that's from Dr. Friedman. So if you have an incentive not to work, guess what? You're not going to work.
Yeah.
But if you have an incentive to get that extra dollar, you're going to do that. Hooray for that. Simplification, less government bureaucracy, less government intrusion, less government expense. What's not to like? Everybody should like it except the people in government. By the way, I was talking about the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I saw a cartoon one time that showed a picture of a big office, and it had Bureau of Indian Affairs at the top, and it was laden with desks, and people were on computers and they were on the phones, except over on one side there was this man in explosive tears. And so the guy said, well, what's the matter with him? And the response was, well, his Indian died. It's almost we almost have as many people in the Bureau of Indian Affairs as we do Native Americans to administer. So his one Indian died. I mean, that was maybe an exaggeration, but not by much. We have this stuff that's out of control, and we need to rein it in. We, the people, need to bring this down.
Well, there's something too with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It's like, how are the Native Americans' lives? Most of them are crap. I mean, it's just horrific conditions. So you guys are doing a terrible job. If your job is to, try and help this community and stuff like that, you're doing a horrific job. I mean,
that's right. If you're in the private sector, you would have been out of business decades, hundreds of years ago. Okay, well, let's look at something different. The Irish came over here as immigrants, and they had a reputation of drinking too much alcohol, right? So I think we should have had a Bureau of Irish Affairs, don't you, to protect these people from themselves. Well, actually, the Irish have done very well, thank you very much, and so would the Native Americans. Make them responsible for their own actions, and get the government out of it, and things will be better off. And then you have that negative income tax, or that stipend, so you have something to fall back on. Same thing with medical. Have medical savings accounts. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And if you don't have any money, okay, the government can add to that. But get the federal government out of the bureaucracy of medicine and bring back the private sector. It works. It just works. The what did I call it? The National Mango Board. I mean, why select the mango production? I guess had a stronger political lobby than the green beans. Get the government out of this stuff.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to ask you about too. As a libertarian, and I know that I'm sure there's different offshoots, and people have different beliefs that call themselves libertarian and stuff like that. But where does the libertarian stand on lobbying? Because I think ending that could save a lot of problems. Where do you guys stand on that?
I think that somebody should have the ability to lobby you as a member of Congress. I'm not going to prohibit it, but we need to have accountability in this whole thing. Money is much too important in politics. If I were king again, I would not allow any non-human being to donate to any political cause. So that means no corporations, no unions, and by the way, if a corporation is going to donate money to my campaign or this PAC or whatever else, they should get all of their shareholders unanimously to agree, because you're spending my money. No, they don't have to do that. Same thing with union. But an individual, look, if you want to spend your own money, Ryan, bless you. We'll have to have accountability. If you donate more than $500 or whatever, then you have to list your name as being there. So Bill Gates, Brian, you're now running for Senate, and Bill Gates donates $10 million to your campaign. If your opponent or your people think that you're going to now be in Bill Gates' pocket, they'll vote for your opponent. but that's okay. Get that honest word out there and get the government away from these things, as well as these other non-human being entities like labor unions. Public employees unions are much, much too powerful in our country. I love police officers. I love firefighters. I love teachers, but they should not be. They're basically, their mantra is, we can elect our bosses. So you go to the board of supervisors in a county, who cares more about whether they're elected or not? Who was elected? The police unions, because now they're going to control whether I get additional monies or get full benefits. So I support you, Jeremiah, for member of supervisors in the county. And now, as soon as you're elected, you're beholden to me. And so we get these things in the sheriff's office. Oh, this was years ago, but in the Orange County Sheriff's Office, I was talking with a guy who pointed at a man who's driving a bus for bringing in the in custodies to the courthouse. And he said, that guy's going to retire in 2 months, and he's going to end up making 150% of what he makes now after he's retired. I said, how can that be? He said, well, the formula is that they get 75% of their last year's salary. Okay, I'll buy into that. But how do you compute the last year's salary? Well, his supervisor's in it with him. So the supervisor will give him all of the overtime that he can possibly use in that last year. And he's not going to take any vacation, so he'll sell that back. That all counts for his last year's salary. So he ends up at 75% of 300% of his salary, and so he ends up with more money. It's a fraud on the taxpayers. And who allows it? The Board of Supervisors, because they know full well that if they don't support the union's not going to support them in their next election. In fact, we've even had some recalls in some city council members because they didn't go along with the unions. The unions spent a couple of $1 million to have them recalled from the. It doesn't work. Much too power. I love teachers, love police, but we should not have public. Even FDR did not believe that we should have public employees unions because they're going to take over the government, which has happened.
Well, and you can unionize yourself right out of a job, really. I mean, we look at all the manufacturing that's gone overseas. It's like, no, we need more money to do this job. We need more money. Okay, well, now we can't afford to hire anybody now, so we have to do it in Mexico or China or wherever.
And that's good in some ways, because if Mexico can raise, I don't know, better beets than we do and sell them at a better price, that we win. We should concentrate on the things that we do well. We do well in technology and our baseball teams or whatever. But it's okay. It's a good thing, because as soon as you start putting artificial barriers there, now you're causing artificiality in the marketplace. And China, say what you will, China has brought several millions of people up out of poverty, and let's give them credit for that. But China is also engaged in World War III with us right now with regard to cybersecurity and stealing our secrets. We should go public with this. We should tell people, look, if I as a consumer knew that China was hacking in and stealing our trade secrets, I wouldn't buy anything from China. I don't care I don't care how much less expensive or whatever else. That would work. Publicity, accountability will work. See, I now my dog agrees with that, so he's come back.
Where do you stand on, because we talk about privatizing things and kind of letting the market run its course. What about privatized prisons?
It works in England. They actually, I'm afraid to tell you that, and I can only really speak for California prisons. The only thing correctional about California prisons is in its name. There's very little correctional going on whatsoever. It's changing a little bit, and hooray for that. But private prisons work because the wardens or the prisons in England have an incentive that there's a tie to the recidivism rate. And if the recidivism rate is low, you make more money. And if the recidivism rate for the people that you're in prison are higher, you make less money. You don't get less of a stipend. So we work on educational skills, on marketing skills, on job skills, on anger control. So in those prisons, it works. In our prisons, it's not used. It's not a part of the function.
Yeah.
So I believe in privatized prisons.
I think that with your scenario, I think that's great. I think right now we've got to have as many people in these prisons as we possibly can. We've got to keep every bed filled. I think it's Maricopa County in Arizona, and that guy's done a whole bunch of different things. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. But I think he's got like a large percentage of the I guess what you would call like 20-year lifers, longer sentence convicts. They all have dogs, and people are like, no, they shouldn't have dogs. They're being punished and stuff like that. And I look at it and I think, well, what if this person never had anybody or anything that loved them and cared about them, and now they can build a relationship with something, and they know what it feels like to feel love and to love something else, and that can change somebody's heart. Whereas you just go to prison and you have to fight to not get raped every day, and you have to stab somebody so they don't steal your sloppy joes. I mean, what are you going to come out as? You're just going to be a worse criminal than when you went in, or I don't even know if I would say worse, but your whole mentality has changed, and you come out just like a berserker. It's crazy.
Well, Jeremiah, most people that go into prison in our country eventually get out. What kind of people are they going to be when that happens? And if they were treated, some of the prison guards can be pretty neurotic.
Mhm.
They like to boss people around. I was on a show called Coast to Coast with George Nuri. Been on a
Love it.
couple of times, and it's on late at night. It's syndicated, and I got a lot of response. And I was there about 4 years ago on his show and talking about the criminal justice issue. And as a result, about 12 men who are incarcerated in prisons around the country started writing to me. So I'm involved in pretty regular correspondence now with about 40 of them. And of course, I
Mm.
don't know them. I don't have any reason to believe what they say particularly, but there's a constant theme. And one of
Mhm.
them is solitary confinement. And
Oh.
a lot of people in prison are mentally ill, and so they're
Mhm.
going to spit at the guards, or they're going to throw urine at them or whatever else like that. And so they want to just get them out from under. So they put them in solitary confinement. And so you're there for 23 hours a day. You see no other human being. Even the tray you get for your food is slid and you can't even see the guard giving it to you. What kind of an effect is that going to have upon a human being? It's an awful thing, and it's inhumane. We have an
Yeah.
absolute obligation. Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote this, and he was a Russian novelist. And he said, you can tell more about a society by walking into its prisons than any other way. It's not the way we treat our elite, it's the way we treat the least among us as to our how you brand our society. Our society would not look very good under those circumstances. We're doing a little bit better. We're starting to get more there. But we have a prison in California. It's about 20 miles east of Oakland. It's called Dublin State Prison. Or excuse me, Dublin Federal Prison. It's federal prison for women, and it's called
Mhm.
the rape stop. And
Yeah.
even the warden has been convicted of allowing rapes to go on in this. Absolutely hideous, absolutely wrong. And now I understand the feds are closing it because they just couldn't control it. But we have an absolute obligation to treat people involuntarily in our custody to a minimum standard of health care, of nutrition, of exercise, and safety. And we're falling down on that, and shame on us. But the prison guards union has a lot to do with that, I'm sorry to say, because they want more people there because it's more job security for them.
Couldn't imagine being a prison guard. I think that would just be about as bad of a job as you could possibly have. And I know that they put the prisons in areas where there's no other jobs. So
Yeah.
it's like you want to work at the prison or
Well,
not have a job.
I don't agree with that so much. I think if you treat people well, they'll treat you well. Now, there's some people that are in prison that are psychotic, and you have to take care of them and be
Sure.
careful. But if you call them by name, and not just hey you or hey scumbag or whatever else, but you treat them well, they'll treat you well as well, and the rest. But you need to give them hope. And that's what I've been doing with my correspondence. It's, hey, congratulations, you're taking a class, a correspondence class. Good for you. Or you've talked to other people about, relationships and the rest of that. Good for you. And they savor it. They eat it up because they don't get they're shunted aside. They're inhuman. They don't count. But if you talk to them, and in fact, I'm going to the graduation down in Donovan State Prison. It's in northern San Diego. UCI, which is a University of California at Irvine here in Orange County, actually has put in classes. This man is graduating with a BA from UCI while he was in prison. I mean, good God in heaven, hooray for that. And applaud it, and let's work for it, because then he's going to be able to get out. And there's another man that has this idea on Knopf, which I'd never really heard of before. It's kind of a hemp-like product, and so I'm supporting him. I'm helping him. He's now been released, and he's trying to put together this organization, this big store, and he's got connections. Hooray! They need help. They need assistance. And need accountability as well. But you can do that as a prison guard, and you can do that as a warden. It's an atmosphere that it can be made better, but in our country, we're not doing very well at it. We lead the world in the incarceration of our people, both by sheer numbers as well as per capita. And here, I assure you, we're number one does not make me proud, nor should it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you never, ever hear a story like that in the media. The only stories you hear about people getting out of prison are the ones that go right back and murder somebody or, do something horrific. You never hear, and I'm sure that that's probably a lot more likely based on what our prisons do to people, but you never hear any good stories. So everybody wants to be like, oh, I'm tough on crime because when they come back out, they just kill people anyway. And it's like, well, there are some success stories. So let's focus on those and try and, replicate what happened when this person graduated with a BA and can come out and be an active, tax-paying citizen.
Well, I took a tour of Norco State Prison, which is in Riverside County here in California, and they had an 80% recidivism rate, which means that people there that were released on parole had 80% of them were back in prison within a year. But it was a medium security prison, and a lot of people there went in and they were drug addicted, and they didn't get any drug treatment when they were there. And so, they'd work on it and the rest, but eventually they'd be released. What is the drug addict going to do? He's now, like we were talking before, he's got a record, so it's hard to get a job. So what does the drug addict that gets depressed do? He goes back and takes drugs, and then he's drug tested, and boom, he's back in prison again. So I learned about this. There was this wonderful group that I can't remember the name off the top of my head, that they taught people to become chefs and workers in restaurants. And so it would be a 12-week class. It wouldn't cost the people anything. And then they would actually be successful in getting about 85% of them a job as a chef after they finished the class. So I heard about this. And so I said, well, look, wait a minute. Why wait for them to get out of prison? They were either people that would finish drug addiction classes, or they'd been released from confinement, or something else. So why wait for him to be released on parole? Let's do it in the prison. And the warden, we went on a tour there, and the warden was very enthusiastic about it. And they actually had a kitchen at Norco prison that was not being used at the time. So we can go in and use that and teach these people to become chefs, which you don't need a license to be a chef, and you don't need any equipment. The restaurants are going to have the equipment. It was perfect. And then COVID hit and the whole thing fell apart. But that's what you do. You not only teach people a job skill, but you give them hope. You give them a reason to think that things are going to go better, and they do.
Well, and it's also an incentive not to go back to whatever you were doing before. I mean, it's not just going to jail that's a deterrent. It's losing your life as you know it now, losing your relationships, your job, money, possessions, all those sorts of things and opportunities. And the way our system's currently set up, most of those are gone. Most of the things that would deter you from committing a crime again are kind of removed because you don't have much to lose.
Well,
So
and
this gives you,
that's true.
like you said, hope and opportunity and a job that you probably don't want to lose.
Well, and that's right. It's both areas. A lot of them are mentally ill, and they don't get any mental assistance, very little. Uh,
hmm
Gosh, I mean, again, some of my correspondents are saying that he's in a wheelchair. He's now 72 years old in a wheelchair, and he had to get down from the bus by himself. Nobody would help him. And then there was the medical facility was on the second floor, but the elevators were broken. So in order for these people to get to the second floor, they'd have to crawl up because they're in wheelchairs. They'd have to crawl up the stairs. Now these are horror stories. Whether they're true or not, again, I don't know. But by goodness sakes, it just we've got to do better than this, and we can, and we will if we get this word out. So I would have any legitimate media be able to have full access to any of our jails and prisons in our country, within concerns of safety, but let them
Sure.
talk to the inmates. And of course, the reporters have a vested interest in not being taken for a ride, so they investigate, but then disclose. Accountability is huge. Accountability is really important for every level of society. And in fact, the higher level you are, the more accountability we should have. And that includes, any of these things going on, allegations about problems with our voting machines and before. That's terribly threatening to our country. We should have had a neutral investigation immediately, let the chips fall where they may, disclose whatever it would have been. And the same thing with January 6th. Look into it. If that's an issue, let's disclose it by some neutral investigators and then publicize the results, whatever they are. I tell you, if you were a prison official and it was found out that in your prison this was going on, you'd change really quickly. You really would, because so disclosure transparency is huge. Libertarians believe in transparency.
Absolutely, and everybody should. I mean, if anybody says that they don't believe in transparency, it's most likely because they're hiding something. So,
You cynic, how could you possibly think such a thing?
I know I'm black pill.
I agree
what
with
can
you.
I say?
Let me ask you, Jeremy, what is that right in front of you? Is that a stone or what is that?
Microphone.
Oh, a microphone. Okay.
Yeah, I've got
a fur on it.
I know. I was thinking about maybe adding some googly eyes right here, making it look like a little Muppet. No, it's just a microphone. I need to.
Okay.
I'm switching to a smaller one. Well, no, that's a fair question. Ryan, I have one more question that I want to end with, but if you have anything that you want to ask, go ahead and take that opportunity.
I mean, I have two questions. Well, I have one question that is probably pretty easy, but I don't know if the answer is going to be that interesting or useful. But
the answer is green.
Okay. What do you think of Vivek Ramaswamy? Because I had listened to some of his interviews when he was still intending to run, and he talked a lot about scaling government back, but he talked about some pretty radical things like maybe we don't need the FBI, maybe we don't need the IRS. Do you think he was trying to maybe grab people's attention by saying something like that, and he really did intend to kind of scale things back in a
I liked him.
way?
He's pretty young. He's pretty inexperienced.
He's
but
like
very,
37, I think. Yeah.
very successful economically, and he's not beholden to anybody. I loved that idea.
Mhm.
So I think he was receptive. If you're successful in business, you're going to be receptive to what works and what doesn't work. I love that idea. And so, yes, I was disappointed that he didn't get farther than I knew he probably wouldn't. But maybe a good vice presidential candidate. I don't know. But the direct answer to your question is I was attracted to him. And, he's throwing some things out there. Let's do away with this. Let's do away. Fine. Let's talk about it. I would not do away with the FBI, by the way.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
with the IRS, the IRS would only be about 20% of what it is today if we were to adopt Milton Friedman's program.
Yeah, and then I wouldn't have to send my taxes off to my accountant who takes like 2 months to do them.
Oh, it costs all kinds of money, particularly if you're a corporation. It costs all kinds of money just to prepare your tax. I pay a tax consultant. I couldn't possibly, I looked at what he did and at what I submitted and signed. I couldn't possibly understand it. Just so complicated.
Yeah.
Let's simplify all of this stuff, and the government will make more money, and it'll cost everybody less money to prepare it. It's simplification is a really good idea.
Yeah. And then the other one would just be, do you have any ideas that we haven't talked about as to how to potentially enact this change? Because I think the thing that we would have to overcome is this set of incentives that are out there for people to maintain the system as it is. I mean, I just recently read, the Nancy Pelosi, I think, was the example that her net worth is estimated to be around $120 million, but her yearly salary is like 179, something like that officially.
She invested it well, though.
Very well. So, I mean, you have people who are paid so well by lobbyists or whatever other interests they have. And how do you kind of...
If you are a public official, you should disclose your income from all levels, in my opinion. But a lot of these people, the Clinton, I hate to get personal on these things, but the Clinton Foundation, it wasn't illegal technically. She was Secretary of State, and he was no longer president. He was no longer working for the public government. So he'd go out and give a speech in Saudi Arabia or wherever else and receives $100,000 for an hour of giving a speech. But while his wife was still Secretary of State, and maybe she'd do some really favorable things for Saudi Arabia. It stinks. We've got to get money more out of politics. And does that mean that we put limitations? Does that mean that the government provides a forum for people? I don't know, but I would go with what I said before and only allow a flesh and blood human being to donate to any political cause. I think that would help a great deal, bring a lot more accountability, because you have all of these silent things going on through government, through PACs, or anything else. We've got to get money more under control. By the way, I will tell you, I'll confess to you that in 1998, I ran as a Republican for Congress. Then in 2004, I ran as a Libertarian for United States Senate in California. And then 2012, I was the Libertarian nominee for Vice President of the United States, along with Governor Gary Johnson, who was our candidate for president. I didn't get close to winning any of those elections. So I tell people with total sincerity that I am not a politician, and I have the votes to prove it.
That's very good. Yeah. And we know, like, companies know, the government knows. I used to work for a military contractor, and if you did the kind of work I was doing, they looked into your finances because they knew they didn't want people in a position where they had access to sensitive information. They did not want those people to be susceptible to bribery.
That's right.
And that was the whole point of it.
And you know that going in. And
Yeah.
Are you giving up some of your privacy? Yes, but at least if there's a rational basis for it, then that's a good idea. And the same thing with any elected official, they should be transparent with regard to all monies taken in. I'm sorry, but that's just a part of the deal, because money is too corrupting.
Yeah.
So you had one more question, Jeremiah, and I have a question for the two of you.
Okay, so I think, and I could be wrong, but I think a lot of our audience leans right. And we are not Trump guys. We're not Biden guys. We're not anybody guys. We just want common sense to kind of, rule. Probably not going to happen. But my question is a president capable of draining the swamp? Now that's a lot of people I know that listen to the show are going to be like, oh no, Trump's this, and then he's going to do this and do that. Is that something that's even possible without, like, if you didn't have like SCOTUS and Senate and Congress, if you didn't have all of them on your team, is that something that's even possible?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. It takes a leader, it takes accountability, and it takes transparency. And if you show people, for example, these different government commissions that I was mentioning, and show them what it's costing us, we had the travel promotion board. They cost money, and just put it out there to people, and then say, I am going to ask if I'm a president, for example, I'm going to ask Congress to pass a law abolishing the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or whatever it would be, and this is why, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we'll discuss it, and we'll have. Right now, by the way, it's still not done to have public television be able to monitor, to be able to telecast debates in the House of Representatives. Why? Because a lot of the representatives are eating a sandwich or reading the paper, or they're not there, or whatever else. It should be. All of the arguments to the United States Supreme Court should be put on public television. The more accountability that we have, the better. And if you have a president that says, draining the swamp, that's a nice cliche, but this is too big. This is going on. We have these various things happening. The people will rally. The people will rally. And if we have somebody that's not going to do it because, you're black, you're white, you're green, you're whatever, or the rest, you're just a person. And you're going to be held accountable. We are a nation of immigrants. We applaud people in immigration. We should decide who comes into our country. It shouldn't be an open border. It should be something. By the way, I have a really good private enterprise way of handling that. We'll talk that in the next session. But we need the transparency. We need the leadership. And right now, we just do not have it. So my question for the two of you is, I guess maybe we're reaching the end of our time, is what do you call, or do you know why the Scarecrow was given an award? Obviously, that's probably a more important question than anything else we've discussed. Why did the Scarecrow receive an award? Because he was found to be outstanding in his field.
Good stuff.
Got to have some fun in this world, don't you?
Well, I mean, politics is really, it's just in a sad state. I remember back in the day when it was, it was exciting and it was interesting, and you believed what people were telling you. And they, like when my dad, I asked him, how do you vote, Dad? How do you know how to vote? And he said, well, you look at the candidates that are running, you see what their stances are on different things, and then you pick the one which either has your values or whatever you believe in. If you believe in those policies, that's the person you go with. And I was like, wow, that actually makes sense. Pretty cool. And then I started realizing that they're just marketing to people. They don't really have any beliefs of their own. It's just whatever I can say to get the vote.
We need to have a different institution. And here I would go with a program called immediate runoffs, so that everybody gets to vote. Say there are 5 people running for Congress, and you vote for your favorite person, and then you vote for your second favorite, and your third favorite, and your fourth favorite. And so then when they tally, computers will do this very easily. You'll run the tabulations, and they'll count everybody's first place vote. And then if somebody wins 50.1%, that person wins. If they don't, then they're going to eliminate the person that got the fewest votes. And then if you voted for the person that got the fewest votes, now they'd count your second favorite instead. And so then they'd run it again until finally somebody would come out and win. That way, and we libertarians face this all the time. It's the wasted vote syndrome. Right. I really don't like the Republican. I really don't like the Democrat, but I really like this one better than that one. And if I vote for the Libertarian, that means that maybe the one I really don't like is going to win. But if you go to this automatic runoff system, that way you can actually vote in favor of people, and eventually the person that wins, everybody would have voted in favor of that person in one sense. Everybody, at least that was a part of the 50.1%. That's an institutional change that I think we should go with. It should be it should be done by the states first to show that it works. And then I hope it would be done nationally. But the states where there are a couple of states that are doing that now, I think it's just a really good idea. So these are institutional changes that we just need some leaders to get out there. But you both are helping. You ask, well, how can we do this? You are doing it right now. We are putting word out to our listeners about different things. And again, please go to my website. It's judgejimgray.com. I've written 6 books and 2 musicals, by the way. My musical, Americans All, is meant to help mentor our high school and junior high school kids. And it's pretty good, I think. And I'm making it available without any fees. But, it's out there. And the whole idea is communication. When I write my 2 paragraphs for Liberty, I send out every 2 weeks. I encourage feedback. I encourage disclosures. I encourage discussion with your friends. Discuss these things. And don't just close your ears and stuff if somebody says something you don't agree with. Listen and figure out why you don't agree with it, and then discuss it. Don't argue it, discuss it. And we can get back to that. The internet, I think, and our cable TV networks have caused some problems there, but they can also be of assistance. So keep doing what you're doing. It's a pleasure to be able to share thoughts with you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Like I said, this is kind of our, soft introduction to libertarianism to a certain extent. Do you care to share who you would support in this presidential election coming up, or is that something you prefer to keep to yourself? And it's okay one way or the other.
I'm not going to vote for Trump, and I'm not going to vote for Biden. I'm just sorry that we have that choice again. During the various campaigns, I sent some money to some minor candidates, trying to encourage them, get some traction, just to get a third voice. But I think it's unfortunate for our country to have to choose between those 2 people.
Well, I'm for King Gray.
Well, unfortunately now, Ryan, I'm running away from office, so I've tried, and my time is behind me. But I'm out there still trying to get things done. I'm helping people resolve their cases, which really feels good. My life has again never been better, and I expect to keep going until I can't.
And you got a cute dog. You got a cute dog to keep you company all the time?
We have 2, but only one. You've only seen one of them.
Yeah, the vocal supporter.
That's Duke. That's right.
The other one doesn't support our show, huh? I'm just teasing. That's all we've got for you tonight on Cryptique. As we said in the beginning, please subscribe. That's what moves the needle for us. So please just click that subscribe button. And remember, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome is the definition of insanity. Remember that in the voting booth. Good evening, Crypt Keepers.